Good morning, traders, and a very happy Thursday out there to everyone. Should be a rather interesting day to line up in front of us here for this Thursday. We do have a piece of data there. That's going to be our unemployment claims there for the U.S. side of things. That'll be due out at 8:30. Really outside of that, that's going to be the main item on the board. We still have the delay in the EIA, so no natural gas figure there today. But we do have a 30-year bond auction later in the afternoon at 1 o'clock Eastern. Always good to make note of there for the fixed income markets, and as we'll take a look at here shortly, bonds are picking up some action there in the overnight session, so we'll want to be mindful of that. That'll be out at 1 o'clock. And then lastly, you have Powell set to speak there at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time there. So a few items in the queue, but really for that early morning session, it's going to be that unemployment claims figure. That's going to be the one of more concern there for us. But with that said, we're going to come in here and look at our daily chart here on the S&Ps. As we know, we haven't been giving up much ground, and we have been working with some consecutive closes on one side of the Scion line here. We've had our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the close yesterday. We had our 7th close above the 5 SMA. We certainly gave it some tests along the way. Yesterday we left a bit of a tail in there, and we'll still want to carry forward the value of the 5 SMA today, which comes in at 43.91 and a quarter. So still doing an okay job of maintaining ourselves above that 5 SMA. Outside of that, bigger picture, we know that we're still inside this previous congestion area, slightly above this 44.07 there from yesterday's high. So we did trade briefly up there, put in a Globex high of 44.10. So we were at least able to make a slightly higher high there in the Globex session, but we also didn't necessarily get superb range expansion as of yet. So any further up from here, we're trading at 44.07. We start to get a little closer towards the top of this previous congestion range. So we have 44.30 half. And BTW, a good sport there. I believe that is certainly correct there. I want to say that is at noon Eastern time. Let me just double check there. Yes, so noon Eastern time looks like that'll be the case there. The supply demand estimates there for the crops. So thank you for the reminder there, and a good one to make note of. But with that said, back to our ES here. Top of this previous congestion area is going to be 44.30. Obviously, it's a little bit of a further ways up there for now, so haven't quite reached up to that zone, but that's more or less what we're working with. So we'll have that 44.30 up above, and in case we showcase any lightening up or any weakness, that's where that 5 SMA would be of good value for us, that 43.91 and change. But as we can see for now, they haven't been doing much work to the downside, and we'll come over here and look at our 240-minute display, or our intraday activity. And also note, just to basically follow up from where we looked at yesterday's close, slow line still correcting itself back down, pretty much all the way back to the 0 mark, and price is keeping itself maintained and holding, so more along the lines of self-corrective activity or positive consolidation. So same idea as we come up here, previous congestion zone, that's the same 44.30 half that, was the top of that previous range. And we'll keep a watch, we'll see, likely that the 5 SMA, just as how it came in yesterday, very close to where the 240-minute moving average comes into sight. So once again, if we lightened up at all, that 5 SMA or 240-minute EMA would serve us well. But for now, they're doing their work to the upside there first, just trading at and around the previous day's high. So nothing to really fault there with some of the progress here in our E-minis. So that's where we stand on that side of the equation. And then we have our DAX future. The DAX arguably putting in a little better of a bid. Good follow through from yesterday's, low to high day. Here in the DAX, still holding above last week's high, 15,338, so we can give them some nice credit there. The structure is a little different than that of our ES because we don't have quite the same degree of that previous range like we have in the ES. But what I do have here on the top chart, is just my best attempt to replicate that kind of similar zone that we have going on with our ES. So, in other words, any further up here in the DAX, I'm just kind of looking at 15,405 as being our kind of point of interest, if you would, because coming up any further on the side of that, we'll start to run into some of these two very heavy high to low selling bars that we had from much earlier on in the month there, well, last month I should say, October 12th and 13th respectively. We had those two strong high to low days. So any further up, and that's where we'd start to run into there as far as that DAX goes. But very nice rhythm there, holding and maintaining itself above last week's high. So we'll want to keep that DAX on the radar there today. Not fair and half bad there for itself. So that's where we stand on that side of things. And then we come over here to that of the euro currency. EC, as we mentioned yesterday on the close, this will be a an important weekly close for it there. We still have been trying to maintain a good bulk of the activity that we had from Friday's low to high trading, right, and our nice impulse. We did trade slightly on the other side of that 50% mark, but did not close on the other side of that 5 SMA. We left one big tail and then proceeded to close ourselves back up above it. On the intraday data, this was what we had unfolding yesterday, as we can recall, the 120-minute display, which did make the lower low, right? That's how we had the lower low on the dailies as well. And then we proceeded to just prop ourselves back up. We did trade quite a lot around this 1.07215 during yesterday's trading. So we came up, traded above it, started to rotate on both sides, and now in the early morning Globex session, just rolling back on the other side of it. So we're playing inside of yesterday's range, which did come in the form of a tail. However, previous day's lows a ways down there. That's at 1.06765. So would be keeping an eye more so to see if they could perhaps hold inside the tail and try and garner up perhaps a potential higher low on the 120-minute display, in which case these tails from yesterday still will be quite crucial. So we'll keep a nice watch there on the euro currency, just doing some brief work on the other side of that 5 SMA there for the time being. So that's where we stand on the euro currency. And then we have the gold, which still is inching itself down a little bit further here. We were looking at the 240-minute display on the close yesterday after already having had 3 days of high to low, but the issue here with the gold is that we still traded below the previous day's low. So we're looking at that 240-minute display coupled with a little bit of a lighter time frame since we had settled with a little loss of momentum on the gold. So we did proceed to get some lift in the overnight session there, which was still met with selling, so still no higher lows forming here in the gold. So that's a little bit of a factor. As I was keeping an eye on the dailies or the 240-minute data, we have this nice top of the big impulse bar that we had at 1946.2. Also have that same zone here on the 240-minute previous reaction high. And overnight we came down awfully close. We traded down to 1948.3, but proceeded to hold briefly above the top of that big cycle impulse bar to the upside that we had. So still would want to keep a watch on that zone there in the gold. It still might take some work. We're starting to work on, a hint of loss of momentum, or buy divergence is starting to form. Has not quite ripened up as of yet, since we don't have any higher lows even on the lighter time frames. We could keep an eye, see if this 240-minute also wants to continue to ripen there. Put in some better basing on the lighter time frames, and in case we do not, that's where that 1946.2 would serve us a little better there in that of the gold. So that's what we have going on there. We like that 240-minute display, seeing if that can catch any traction. To compare, this one's also very interesting, is that of the crude, right? That 2-period rate of change low readings we had from yesterday, often lending itself to a bit of a consolidation day on the day following, which we've already seen a little of that unfolding overnight. In other words, they're trading as an inside range bar with 74.91 as being the previous day's low. The item here with the crude is, as we can see here, I mean, a 120-minute display gives us that nice, M or W shape as far as the oscillator configuration goes. So the lower low in the price with the higher low in the oscillator. So we had some of this buy divergence unfolding overnight, and we can see we're already coming up close to revert back towards the mean. So what we have here is two very strong days of high to low, and all we're doing so far is a pause bar of green. So this 120-minute moving average comes in at 76.50, and that might provide us a little point of interest, see how the market responds to that zone. But obviously, as we know, the crude has had some nice heavy selling pressure, very stretched away from that 5 SMA, and they're already having some counter-reactive lift going on in the Globex session already. So they already have some counter-reactive lift. So we want to keep an eye, see how they start to trade, during our early morning or early U.S. morning session, I should say, since they had quite a busy overnight there. And then lastly here, the bonds, which had quite the play there yesterday. In other words, we had that major non-confirmation up against those 10-year notes, which did not get above last week's high like we certainly saw there in the bonds and the boons on the Europe side of the equation. Now we can see that even the boons working themselves back below 130.76, so just coming back beneath previous swing high. And drum roll here on our 30-year bonds, we put in a nice inside range bar there in the overnight session, but we did proceed to lighten up a notch, and we pulled back none other to previous cycle high. This was October 12th, right? And we had that was important from last week on Friday when we were taking it out, and still would serve us equally as well during today's trading. So we're coming back to previous tail area, trading at around it 114.11. So we're holding one tick above that zone for now in the case of those 30s. We bring over our intraday data. See if we can include just enough data points there, just enough so we could see that previous 114.10 there for us. So we came up, did some nice work, a good extension nonetheless above that previous high. And now we're just sitting on the other side of the 120-minute EMA and that 114.10. So those will be some nice zones to see how the market comes in and responds to them. And that's really more so there in the 30 years than that of those 10-year notes. So with that said, now I'm going to shrink up these charts a little here. We do have that 8:30 data point to bear in mind, and then shortly thereafter we'll have Damon back on with his screens for the day. And with all this action, or some of the action that we had overnight, it should be a rather interesting day to see where we stand on some of these market profile charts. So with that said, I'm going to shrink these back up. We'll dial it back, that way everyone has a few moments to dial things in, get themselves in order before our morning data point, and then we'll see what we have lining up here for the day in front of us.